Say you've been married to your second spouse 20 years. Well, here's the problem. Because under Tennessee law, even if you have a will, your surviving spouse can elect to take what's called an intestate share, which means that they get to opt out of the will and get more. And if they're married for 20 years to you, that means that can be 60% of your estate. Talk about creating a conflict, right? That is a recipe for litigation. So I want to share a story. I was invited to a wedding. Two of our friends were married, and it's kind of unusual. It was wonderful, touched my heart, but it's unusual because the woman was in her late 70s and her groom was in his 80s, well into his 80s. And they had both lost longtime spouses. But about a year after, they found love and companionship in each other and were married. And we had a chapel full of friends, most of them 70 and up, but it was a great celebration. And they decided to marry at a late age, as I said. So today we're going to be talking about second marriages later in life and just finding love later in life on Boomer Time. So it's not surprising that people don't want to be alone. Isolation, we've talked about that before on the show, is a big problem, especially as you age, and can be a problem for caregivers as well. Not only with the death of a spouse, but sometimes even with friends. I have a lot of clients who will tell me as we're working through estate planning, I'll ask them, do you have alternates for powers of attorney, things like that? And they say, everybody I know is older than I am, so who am I supposed to pick? And it's true, it becomes challenging, but we work through those things. And, friends, just like us, get older. And it can be sometimes that people start to die off. It's like an entire community or a community of relationships, really, that you've built over the years just starts fading away. We don't want to be alone. And we're not meant to be alone, right? The Bible says that we're not supposed to be alone. And I believe that to be true. So we're talking about finding love later in life, whether it's marriage, dating, or even just being together. And there is a lot that you have to think about when it comes to these things, including some legal issues. There's some planning you need to do because you're bringing different things to the table the second time around. And it can lead to big problems if you don't think about it the right way. I'm excited to tell you also that, of course, we're on video now. Isn't that exciting? And we had talked about that coming, and here we are. So I'm glad you're watching, and I'd love to know what you think. You can still hear us on Spotify and audio and so forth, but I'm glad to be here and glad you can see me and look forward to sharing with you as we continue this development or evolution in our podcast. So we're talking about finding love later in life, and especially when it comes to marriage, there's some things that you really need to consider before jumping the broomstick for the second time, so to speak. And, that's because when you're later in life, you're bringing different things to the table. You've got prior families that are coming together. So it's not just two people becoming one and married. You're bringing two families in, two families with traditions, with history, with patterns of behavior, either good or bad, right? Personality types, issues, all kinds of things. And these need to be considered. They also bring with them, of course, different assets. You may have accumulated assets over your time, hopefully, over your lifetime. And you may have some liabilities. So those are things that you need to work through. And I really don't want to underestimate the importance of this because especially when it comes to passing away, if you have a second spouse, it can lead to a boatload of trouble, I'm telling you, and lead to litigation, broken relationships, the only ones that would get the money really are the attorneys. So I don't want that to happen to you. Some of the things that, are advantages when you're a senior, I just want to kind of generally touch on some of these. If you did marry later in life, of course you have that companionship. And like I said, you don't want to be alone. And that helps your health too, to have somebody that you can share your life with. Of course, as we talk about here on Boomer Time often, as you age, so comes sickness, right? Or maintaining your health. So if someone has a chronic illness, you want to really think about that, because that could come with caregiving, really. And you want to know who's going to be doing what and how, and who's responsible for what and how. And how does the family, the extended family, so to speak, how do they factor into all of that? Because they're an emotional part of that, Financial security, I've already talked about that. If you have more assets, I guess you could live more comfortably. And you got to figure out who's going to pay for what and what assets are going to go where and who's going to have those if something happens. Because, of course, marriage is until death do us part, unless there's another reason, divorce or something else that's separated you. But that makes things very complicated. And as I've said, I'm going to talk more about probate related to marriage, especially second marriages. There's some things in the state law that you really want to be aware of. So stick with me. I cannot underemphasize how important it is for you to hear this information that I'm going to share with you today. There are so many complexities that if you don't look at them and you don't plan, those are just going to follow you right to your estate, and you will really regret it. So I want you to stick with me, and we're going to talk about that. We'll take a quick break, and when I come back, we're going to talk about the D word: divorce and dating. 2 D words. Okay, be right back. So I'm so glad you're a part of the Boomer Time community, and I want you to stay connected with me. There are all kinds of ways you can stay connected. Of course, you can go to my website, nancycogar.com, and you will find the ability to connect with me. There's some new resources coming pretty soon that I'm excited about, and we'll tell you about that soon. But you can subscribe to our elder law news you can use, which always has great articles. You're not going to find those kind of articles anywhere else. And I hand select those because I know that those are issues that are important to you. So don't miss that. It's free too, okay? Just connect and we'll get you on the list. You can also watch and see and hear now all the podcasts from the past. So those are there on the website, and we'll continue to be there. You can follow us on Spotify, and we're on YouTube, of course. Don't miss an episode, and share it with a friend, please, so they can get connected too. We are all in this together, right? Well, welcome back, everybody. Nancy Cogar here with Boomer Time. And I am so glad to be here with you, and I hope you like our space here. We wanted to make it inviting for you and comfortable so that we could talk about these kind of issues, have real time together to move through important issues and sensitive issues. So today we're talking about finding love later in life, and we talked about marriage, and I'm going to touch on more of the complexities and preparation that should be done if you're planning a second marriage later in life. So stick with me on that. But first I wanted to talk about the 2 Ds, because those are important too. And the first D is dating. So, it's been a long time, several decades since I dated. And I would probably assume that that's the same for you. If you're 50 and up, it's a whole new ball game out there. But you know what? More people 50 and up are finding themselves back in the dating game. And that's because of our second D, which is on the increase. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Pew Research Institute, which does all kinds of studies, they had a study they did just recently and had some numbers I wanted to share with you. Because here's the thing about dating. it's all internet now. Make things even more complicated. And I don't want to start on some of the concerns about that, but online dating means you're going to be on a dating app. So it says, this Pew research says that 1 in 6 Americans age 50 and older, that is about 70% of those polled, have never used a dating app or site. Well, you know what that means? That means 80% have, which that's kind of surprising to me. Well, if you've used one, write to me. Let me know what your experience was like. Maybe you met the love of your life. I would love to hear that. So continue to share those things. So, but those dating apps, they can be a bit intimidating. Looks like the ones used the most were Tinder and then Match.com. I have no experience with those, so I cannot tell you which one is better, of course. But this is just interesting. And older women that use those dating apps, they're the most likely to say that their online dating experiences were negative. Maybe it's, somebody puts a picture up and they look pretty good, and then you show up and they're not advertising the same package, right? So I don't know. But if you've had a negative experience, let me know about that too. Oh, I would be interested about that. But more people are getting back into the dating scene. So that is an issue. And more of us are just old. You may not ever consider using an online dating service, but it might be something you want to consider in the future, because, you know how I love numbers and statistics. The Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability projects that just here in Tennessee, there'll be 1.9, that's almost 2 million seniors 60 and over by 2030. So we're 2024. That's not that far away. I wanted to also talk about finding love, of course, in the future. And, there's even shows, Golden Bachelor. I think that just started. I've never seen that before, but let me know what you think about that. But, we're all living longer too. That means that if you're widowed or divorced or you've never been attached, you may have more time, and you may have more challenge to try to find somebody that you want to spend time with, right? And we all come with baggage. You got to expect that. We've got a history, as I've mentioned before. We all have habits, good and bad, right? We all have lifestyle choices. We all have hobbies. Sometimes those hobbies are more expensive than others. You got to confirm you're on the same page as far as your children are concerned. When I married my husband, he had 3 teenagers and had custody of all of them. That was a bit difficult, but they're all wonderful now. But you got to consider that, Is that wayward son going to move back in the house with you and your new spouse? Do you want that? That's important. Very important. Remarriage impacts Social Security, eligibility, and long-term care. It may affect that. And like I said already, you have to be honest about healthcare and aging. That's the dating world. But I wanted to talk about divorces. There's so much on the rise in older adults that they've given them a nickname. They're called the gray divorce. And I think that's unfortunate that there's so many more that they're getting a nickname. But it's something that's on the rise. And I think, again, it's because more people are living longer, and there's more fractured families and disputes, and maybe they're not planning effectively before they decide to get married. And of course, you need to have some counsel. And I'm a person of faith, and I believe that needs to be a part of it too. So, all right, the big piece that I wanted to talk to you about, of course, and this is something that relates to my legal practice, and that is estate planning considerations. Okay? If you are going to marry for the second time, this is something you absolutely need to look at. And it, as I've already said, it's not just 2 people joining together. There's 2 families, right? 2 families with lengthy history. I've said, you've got your own assets, maybe liabilities. Do you have debts? Maybe you had a spouse that died and that spouse left you things. What do you plan on doing with those? You're going to use them for your lifetime? And then do you want to leave them to your children? Do you want to leave them to your new spouse? Would they go to his children? These things happen all the time. And, if you're not planning, then you're planning to create these kind of problems. So estate planning is really important. The other thing I want to tell you also, I don't see this as much, but if you have a will, of course, you do companion wills, one to each other. And then, if one's gone, this is what happens after the second goes. Here's a little secret. The second one can change the will after you're gone. I know that's not funny, but they can, okay? And they do sometimes. Because a will is not effective until after you die. So as long as you have capacity to make one, you can change one. And that's important to think about too. So you want to think about how you want to structure your estate planning. You might want to think about a trust. They got a lot of benefits, and I talked to a lot of people about that. So here's one other thing I wanted to mention, and I'm not saying you're millionaire on Park Avenue, but with second marriages, you really want to consider prenuptial agreements. Yes, I said it, prenuptial agreements. And here's why. Okay, this is the big elephant in the room, I guess you could say. It is the fact that if you do not have estate planning, and even if you have a will, here's what's available under state law. And most states are like this, but this is specifically in Tennessee, I'm talking, of course. Say you die. You've provided in your will $10,000 to your second spouse who survived you. And your kids get the 90%, right? Say you've been married to your second spouse 20 years. Well, here's a problem. Because under Tennessee law, even if you have a will, your surviving spouse can elect to take what's called an intestate share, which means that they get to opt out of the will and get more. And if they're married for 20 years to you, that means that can be 60% of your estate. Talk about creating a conflict, right? That is a recipe for litigation. And that's even if you have a will. So prenuptial or even a postnuptial agreement can avoid that. And I'm not saying, oh, I know you trust your spouse and so forth, but things change sometimes, especially after you're gone. So I really cannot, like I said, underestimate the importance of this. So I hope that you will look at some of the things I post online as far as resources related to this. And there's a book out called The Generous Prenup. I have not read it, but it is something that could be helpful either with a divorce or with the death of a spouse. So take a look at that. And, you can always reach out to me through my website, nancycogar.com, or you can call me at my office and we can talk about some of these things more specifically. Okay. All right. Well, let's take another break. And when we come back, we are going to talk more about finding love later in life. Be right back. Welcome back to Boomer Time. It's your host, Nancy Cogar, and I'm so glad you're here today. And we're on video. Let me know what you think about having the video. I'm still building community, and I would love to hear from you. And don't forget to share. I need you to share these podcasts so we can continue to build that community. I really appreciate it. So we're talking finding love later in life, which is a wonderful thing. I already shared a story of two of my friends that found love later in life in their 80s and late 70s. So it is possible. Of course, the world's changed a little bit since the last time you may have been dating, but we talked a little bit about that. Talked a little bit about divorces being on the rise. And, of course, the thing that I really wanted to emphasize to you was some of the things you need to think about before you get married and what you bring to the table and what you need to prepare for. You're not being difficult. These are important issues, and I guarantee you, if you do not address them, it will lead to a conflict down the road. Period. Okay, well, as you know, I really get riled up about scams. I do not like scams. I hear about scams all the time, and I always want to share those with you because I do not want you to get scammed. I hear people all the time that unfortunately are becoming victims either by phone, the internet. Here's one for you, a new one, okay? Lady out in Harrison. Someone called her, said it was Medicare, and they said, you owe Medicare $25,000, and you better pay this or you're in real big trouble, lady. First of all, Medicare is not going to call you and tell you that you owe money. Well, get this. She hung up the phone and they told her they were going to come by and pick up this $25,000. Well, they did. And she gave it to them. $25,000 in cash. This was an educated and smart woman that maintains her life. And she didn't find out till after she gave the money that she got scammed. So remember, folks, go back and listen to some of my episodes too about scams. They are plentiful. So I wanted to talk about romance scams because they're out there too, unfortunately. And I had another story for you that I wanted to share. And this one was through the computer and it was just awful. I tried to help this woman, tried to help her family, and the woman just dug her heels in the ground and was convinced that this man from Russia was coming to marry her and make her life just wonderful, happy ending. Well, unfortunately, I found out recently that she lost her house. She lost over $200,000. And she now lives in an apartment in a independent living facility because of that scam. And that guy's never going to get caught because he's probably calling from a boiler room and they were transferring money over the internet. Just awful. So remember, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. All right. So in romance scams, that's just what I talked about there. That was a romance scam, okay? A criminal, they may be on the other side of the globe, is faking an online identity to try to gain the victim's affection and trust. These guys are professionals. They're women too, so for you men out there, just don't think that you're out of the blue because they could be coming after you too. And the scammers use this illusion of romance and close relationship and you never being alone again to, quite frankly, manipulate you and just steal from you. The scammers want to establish a relationship as quickly as possible and endear themselves to the victim and gain their trust. You know what? They're so good at it that the victims sometimes shut out their family because they're so convinced that these people are in love with them and they just need to lend them some money to come over or whatever it is, and they may propose marriage. They may propose to meet at the top of the Eiffel Tower in Paris. They may want to meet you at the top of the Empire State Building, like that romantic movie. Remember that? But it's never going to happen. Eventually, they will ask you for money. And as I explained earlier, sometimes it's a lot of money. So the FBI is especially concerned about these romance scams. And they do have a list of things you should be concerned about and things you should think about to protect yourself. Okay. As I said, I am always reporting these back to the Attorney General's office, and they just really tear me up. But if you want to protect yourself, here's some things that the FBI recommends. Be careful about what you post and what you make public online. Okay. Scammers can use those details that you share on social media and dating sites to target you and get information about you. You may not even realize that, right? You want to look at the person's photo. We talked about this with dating apps. That may not really be their photo. Just because they say it's them, it doesn't mean it's them. If you meet someone online and you like them, go slowly and ask lots of questions. Tell somebody about it. Don't shut out your family, okay? Be aware if this individual seems too perfect, or quickly ask you to leave the dating service or social media site because they want to communicate with you directly. That's a warning sign. Beware of individual attempts to isolate you or family, like I said, or if they send you some kind of risque photo or inappropriate photo, that is a big red flag, okay? If they're asking for your financial information, cut it off. Cut it off, okay? They're trying to extort you more likely than not. Beware of promises, like I said, to meet in person. They'll usually have some excuse why they couldn't, but it's a scam, okay? And never, ever, ever send money to anyone that you've communicated with online or on the phone. Just don't do it, okay? So here's a piece of information I wanted to share as we wrap things up today. Tennessee just recently passed new legislation, okay, that kind of deals with financial exploitation of older adults. They passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate, and it's set to take effect October 1, so that's coming up. Banks will have a connection with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, TBI. They'll have a direct connection to report any suspicious activity in the bank involving seniors. I hear about this a lot, like I said. So whether it's a family member, that helps with banking, or a third party, or you're trying to take advantage of an older adult, you are going to be confronted with this, and I hope it stops a lot of scamming. As I've said before, older adults, the boomers out there, we represent the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the United States. That's because we've all worked so hard, right? But you don't want thieves and criminals to be taking that away from you. You've built that legacy for a reason. So I hope you will take these things to heart and continue to really scrutinize and question things that seem too good to be true, right? I just want to conclude today and say, of course, I'm a lawyer, so I'm always looking at, risks, and I want to warn you about things you should do and things you shouldn't do. But I did want to say that, if you find someone wonderful in your life, then that really is a gift. Especially, like my friends that I told you about early on. They know each other in church, okay? They've known each other, probably 15, 20 years, and they knew their spouses. So this is a circumstance where, is more innocent, I think, and they knew each other and had an existing relationship. But they still have complexities about estate planning and bringing those different, pieces to the table. So even in the best circumstances, you have to plan. Please plan, okay? That will make me very happy, and do it the right way. So I'm glad you joined me today, and I'm so glad that you can see me, and looking forward to continuing to share with you. So this is our space. This is our place. And like I said, I'm just glad to build community so we can help everyone age more gracefully. Okay? So I'll see you next time on Boomer Time. Okay? Bye-bye.